All right, guys, welcome to the live stream. It has been a little while, so good to see some of you there in the chat. So just before we start, as you can see, I am not providing you with financial advice. Please do your own research. Trading is risky. Crypto is even more risky. And that is the end of the formalities. So I am going to have a little bit of an agenda today, which is to try and decide to answer the question of, was my target back in February of 2023 of 180K, is it still in play or is the top in, as Capo seems to think, our friend who likes to be bearish in a bull market. With that, we'll also go on to look at, obviously, Bitcoin itself. We're going to look at MicroStrategy. We're going to look at Ethereum. We're going to look at Sol, and we will also do some questions and answers as well. I will keep an eye on the chat, so I will try and pick up some stuff if you've got any questions along the way. If you don't, that's fine as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. So originally the 180 target, I guess you're wondering where that came from. It wasn't just sort of plucked out of thin air. I built this model way back, probably around about that time, to be fair, trying to work out what could happen. And this chart is very similar to the one that originally I posted back in 2016, which helped call this top and bottom. So putting a bit of a mathematical inspection, or whatever you want to call it, behind it, led to this chart being created. You can have a look on the Decent Trader website if you so wish and track it from there. The price unfortunately doesn't update on it because I haven't got around to getting the devs to sort it out yet, but you can effectively just run the mouse along the lines and come up with where the model predicts the price is going to be. And we are currently in November, let's call it December, and it's telling us that the top of the market may come around 124, or the topping part of the market, somewhere between 125, let's call it, and 200K. So actually, the further forward in time we go, the better in terms of the high. But if we wanted to sort of be as conservative as possible, you'd obviously look at the lower price. So you can play around with that till your heart's content to come up with whenever you think the cycle top's going to be. I'm going to tell you what the price I think it's going to be is, or roughly what the range will be. So as of last month, when things were pumping, this would tell you that 120 or so would be around about the start of place to look to take profit. So fundamentally behind everything that I'm doing, that's kind of what I'm thinking is looking at this. And overall, I will touch on a bit of my strategy as we go. Like personally for me, this market, and again, this is very unique to different people. Different people have been in the market for a different amount of time, so it just doesn't apply. Some people are in with all of the money. Some people are in with 1% of their money. So you've got to be careful when you listen to people on Twitter about, oh, I'm selling everything. Well, they may only have $100 in, or they may be in for $10 million. Who knows? So what I would say from the off is I do actually, although it's a bit of a meme, do your own research, not financial advice. This is really your baby. No one else can tell you what to do. No one else is in your position. It's your financial position. You've got to do the right thing for you. These models are just purely a guidance. My strategy in this market is it's somewhat based around actually the banking and all that sort of stuff at the minute. I've experienced difficulties getting money into crypto in the last bull market, in the bear market at the bottom. It was very difficult to deposit, particularly in the UK. So I would bear in mind, if you have made substantial gains, be aware that it might be difficult to get the coins back, or the dollars rather, or pounds or whatever, back into the market because of the way that the banks are. So for me, I'm going to take out what I want, which for me will be about a third of my position overall, and then the rest's just going to stay in the ecosystem, and I'll probably never take it out. It'll be in there one way or another, or it'll be spent from the ecosystem. So that's just a bit of an insight into my overall kind of strategy. Generally speaking, the other 2/3 that's going to remain in will be actively managed using the Decent Trader tools. By the way, there is a Black Friday sale on Decent Trader's tools for 55% off, and also you can get access to the site as well on an ongoing monthly subscription. Oh yeah, I meant to tell you to like the video and share and all that sort of thing. I will just give a little bit of a check to the chat. Everyone seems to like to say hello, which is good. So hello everyone there. So yeah, that's my overall strategy. So bear that in mind when we're talking. I think that what we like to do is start at the top of the base camp, which is effectively the Decent Trader dashboard, where we can see things like how's Predator doing for Bitcoin and Ethereum, how's the market positioned, and then we've got something called Commando, which effectively ranks all of the different coins with a score from -1 to 3. And then we put in the ones which are doing the best over 3 days, over 1 day, over 3 days right now, and then also recent upside movers, the worst ones, and of course recent downside movers. So anyway, at the minute on the daily, it's starting to look a little bit bearish. I will talk about what I call foils, which is funding, open interest, and long short ratio, and explain a little bit more about how I use that when we get into things. Of course, we are on extreme greed. The fear in greed index, to me, it's a bit of a nonsense in some ways, because in a bull market, it's just extremely greedy all the time. So it is useful, but it's kind of telling us what we already know anyway. So 180K, do I think it's still possible? The short answer is yes. But actually, important point is, the longer the cycle goes on, the more likely it is that we hit, because we'll get the lower band will also extend further. So do I think that we're going to get to 180K? Probably not. Where do I think that at the bottom of the next bull market's going to be? Well, actually, you can just drag this line along and decide, well, I think that we're going to bottom at X period of time. And so let's just look eyeballing it. I reckon around 65, 70K will probably be the bottom of the next bull market. Just eyeballing this. I'd have to give you the exact dates. I personally prefer to use the halving cycle as my basis, which is why I created this chart, which has been copied to death, by the way, but never mind. They do say copying is a form of flattery, but whatever. So of course, this starts on the halving cycle start date, and it's just got all of the different bull markets inputs here, and you can see we're effectively trending on target with the previous cycle, which interestingly we were actually doing that for a little bit last cycle as well. But anyway, you can see that each of the halving cycle tops generally puts in a low, which is, well, a lower high, and you can see that the bottoms are effectively also doing something similar as well. So at the moment, we're on our way to being somewhere towards the top. If we said this was the top, you might say that we'd top somewhere before, well, let's say about day 500. So you can go away and go and look at this chart, decide what you think the top's going to be. You can take the last cycle's top as the earliest date, and then you could take maybe it's the 2017 top, and also interestingly the cycle top of the previous cycle of around day 500 or so. I really should have just looked at that to get the day, shouldn't I? You can take those as like some sort of guidance and then go and add that on effectively to this chart to come up with what you want. But that's my sort of basic thought process, and I do think that basic thought processes generally tend to be the best way to do things. But ultimately, it is telling us that we still probably have some way to go, and actually, we're probably about halfway through from where the halving was. So there's possibly still a lot to go. What I would caveat that with is we live in a crazy world at the moment. We've got potentially World War III kicking off if it hasn't already started, and then of course we've got new incumbents in the White House, so not too sure what might happen there. But overall, over time, Bitcoin has in the past gone up, and it doesn't really give a toss about what's going on with everything else. And actually, chaos often leads to higher prices. So let's bear that in mind. So let's have a look at Bitcoin. I think the most recent chart, I don't post so much on TradingView anymore. I only post when I'm pretty damn sure what I think is going to happen was this Bitcoin reaccumulation. And I always love it when people come here and tell me about how stupid I am, and then get to go back and remind them, because I've got a very good memory for that. So if you do say something like that, I will come back and get you. But anyway, if you want to grab the chart, you can do this as well. Actually, if you like my setup, for example, on TradingView, and you've got the indicators, you can just come and steal it by grabbing the chart like that. And I was pretty sure we're going to have this happen when we broke out. And a lot of my trading these days, it's actually got more basic over time. My tools behind the scenes are a little bit more complicated, but the actual rules on which that I trade are pretty straightforward. And some of them are as simple as, effectively, are we above this middle line here? I should really say, actually, this is a combination of Predator and Iron Man, which are two of Decent Traders' tools. Iron Man's more of a customizable indicator, so you can effectively create your own candle colored indicator strategies based on whatever indicator inputs you want. So there's 7 different indicators you can combine, or you can add in the pre-built settings, which is the one that I generally show, which is generally meant to work on the 5-hour time frame, and then you can automate it with stuff like 3 commas or whatever, MT4. So that's combined with Predator, which is the actual color candled overlay, because that's my sort of default that I use. And then also I'll be using Sniper as well, which is a volume based support and resistance level tool, which you can again automate and do stuff like that. But anyway, I won't refer to those again. I'll just assume that you've picked that up. Oops, that's the wrong one. Right, let's take that off. Okay, so effectively what I like to look for is, are we green on Predator, and are we above the 50 DMA? And then ideally, have we broken out of the settings which I like to have on Supertrend, which is these purple and green shaded areas below and above the line. And for me, as soon as we break the 50 with the green, what that means to me is, if we still have a bearish trend like we do here, it's effectively a bullish rally within a bearish trend. See, the same thing happened over here. We broke out, we got some green. Actually, this one was a better example, because the perfect scenario is you break out with a green and you're above the bearish trend. Same thing over here, break out above the green, above the bearish trend. So that's what happened here. We did go green a little bit earlier, and I posted my thing a little bit prematurely, and people came along and told me that I was wrecked, which obviously I wasn't. But ultimately, you can see that the same process worked here. The little dots below it, by the way, are where all of these different indicators at the bottom are green as well. So it's like, yeah, definitely pretty hot when that happens. So we've come up and we've hit the 1.618. So target was hit. Yes, that is true, actually, Stefan. The 3-day is the daddy on Predator, whereas actually with Iron Man, the God mode's 5 hours. So anyway, so here we are breaking above here, and we got to the 1.618, 100K. Happy days. Didn't quite get to the whatever, but we didn't draw it, 101, but we didn't quite draw it. You can't get it exactly right all the time. But for me, that was a bit of a result. So the question is, do we continue higher? So last time we got to the 1.618, we actually just burst through it. Now, we haven't done that this time, and I think that is mainly because it's a big round number and people do want to offload. And to be honest, I did sell a bit of Bitcoin at 99K, because it was a bit like, I got involved in crypto in 2016, right at the start. Back in those days, getting to 10,000 seemed like a lot. And here we are at 100,000. And I think sometimes you just need to take a little bit of profit and enjoy your life a little bit. Because while I do tell you all of these things about my opinions, and I have been right in the past, it doesn't mean I'm going to be right in the future necessarily. So I do like to take profit, and also, I do have to live my life as well. So unlike some people who just want to be fully invested in crypto all the time. That's not really the way that I play the game. So we're not going to do this consolidation perhaps between this between the 1.618 and 2 that we did last time, but I do think we might get a similar sort of consolidation to this. Now there's a big player in the market, of course, which is MicroStrategy. We do have the ETFs as well who are buying. And Saylor's bought about half of the 42 billion. So he's spent about 21 billion so far, which is an absolutely insane amount of money to spend on crypto. But he's got the same like clip to effectively unload again to buy up. I think at today's prices, it's about 210,000 Bitcoins. So can he take us to the next level? I would suggest that, well, actually, we saw him do 5 billion the other week, and we didn't really move too much, did we? So despite that, 20 billion or something is quite a lot. And he's not the only guy, don't forget. We've got the ETFs we're on Ethereum here, but the ETFs have been absolutely humping in through the whole cycle. I think I worked out the average was about 200, somewhere between 150 and 200 million a day, which is just crazy. So we've got them as well, obviously piling in, and then other institutions just doing their own thing. So on Friday, we had the 320 million come in. We will talk about how Ethereum has actually for the first time flipped a little bit later. But yeah, so can we get onto the next level? I do think that Saylor is probably going to help us get there. But other reasons why I don't think that the top's necessarily in yet. Pi cycle top, obviously I know Phil very well from Decent Trader and before. And the Pi cycle top has pretty much got the top just about every cycle. How it does that, I just don't know. But it is definitely one of the things that I'm looking for. I will tell you actually a list of things that I'm looking for the cycle top to be in. But I'm going to do that towards the end. This is obviously one of them. And at the minute, you can see, obviously, it's the two moving averages are miles apart. If you talk to Phil about this, he said way back here that he didn't actually think this would work this cycle, but you'll have to speak to him about that, because I was never too convinced with his reasoning. But he's the creator, so he's the guy to ask about that. So that will be one of the things, but also the Puel multiple. The Puel multiple, this, by the way, is how much money are the miners making versus their previous, the average that they've been making over the last 365 days. So what's that's trying to look at is like how much do the miners want to dump on the market because they're just simply in profit. Now, I know there's a lot of different discussion around whether the miners might actually start holding on to their coins. And while that's a nice, so the idea there would be to kind of apply the Saylor strategy of just holding your coins in your balance sheet. But the reality is these guys have got the electricity to pay for. So maybe they just raise debt to pay for the electricity and don't sell the coins. That would be the perfect scenario. And in that case, this actually would probably not work. But as you can see, we're not even anywhere near as high as we were before the halving. So you can see where these drop-offs happen. Obviously, the output of the coins for the miners decreases by 50%, which means that you get this big drop-off. And then what happens is the miners take all their profit while they can, and they're effectively getting double the coin. But once that halves, they're obviously more inclined to kind of hang on to it. So you then get this sort of second wave up pretty much in every cycle. What's interesting is it actually came a little bit higher than some of the previous times this has happened. But generally speaking, as soon as this thing gets up to like a multiple of like 2, it's not a bad idea to start selling it. It can do higher, but a lot of these long-term charts you're going to notice have started putting in lower highs generally. Again, that's probably because the miners are a little bit more wise to going through bear markets over the long term. So we're not sure how they're going to behave in the future. A lot of them are actually listed as well now, and they've got more shareholders to think about. So it depends really maybe what the shareholders want to actually do. But at the moment, the Puel multiple's 1. So the miners aren't particularly under a great deal of pressure to sell at all. What else have we got? I did have another chart to share. Yeah, can't recall. MVRV Z-score. Let's go and get that. So the MVRV Z-score, what this does is there's an orange line which is plotted here. And the orange line effectively represents the realized cap. So that what that means is it's kind of taken the market cap of Bitcoin, but it goes off the date at which the coin was last moved. Not necessarily a whole coin, it's just, you know, the output. So that tells us in a roundabout way the distance between the two market caps is like how deep in profit are people who are holding those coins. It's not perfect because, well, there's many reasons it's not quite perfect, but it's not a bad tool to work with. And again, look, lower highs. And why is that? I suspect, again, for the same reasons as before, something to do with people getting a bit more wise to wanting to take profit because of the pain of the bear. And at the minute, this is only 3.29. Now, I've modeled this, and it's almost, I think that, like, if you model it in straight line, it's got like a very high R2, meaning that there's a really strong correlation, and that comes out at about 5.7. So if we do continue this downward sloping lower highs, 5.7 might be where we get to. You can probably route backwards engineer that as well to work out what price it would be. So that's the general overall view for Bitcoin at the moment. I think what I'll do now is I'll just sort of talk about what happens next. Now, the one thing that I really did quite like was that as it currently stands, if we go and have a look at the 5 hour, the 5 hour has become my favorite time frame. Partly because Iron Man is the tool that I like to use, and if it's going to load, that's not the right one. I've changed something. It doesn't matter. And you can go and have a look at the performance of that over time. I posted it on Twitter. I've just got a funny time period loaded at the minute. But anyway, effectively, if you look at where we are now, what we're doing is we've broken down from this trend that we're in on the up, and we are grinding against the resistance. So this was like a great place here to pay attention to, because we do actually, and often the best places to look are directly to the left. And you can see we had exactly the same sort of scenario over here where we're trying to swing up, broke down, and then we broke out. And what happened? We broke out of the super trend at the downside on the settings that I like to use with a green candle. See here, we started to get the green on Predator, broke out, and then we ran to the upside. I think there is actually another example. What I will say is it doesn't always work though. Not that one. Somewhere further back. It doesn't always work, but sometimes you do get a different outcome, which looks a bit more like this, which is the previous cycle when we put top in. So here. So this is the other side of it to look out for, which is effectively where you get breakdown of the trend, and then you retest the underside and you get the sell-off. It looks a bit easier on linear, that does. But that's what I like to call a complacency shoulder. And these complacency shoulders can often lead to a bit of a correction. Didn't quite get it, didn't quite hit it there, but it did hit the top of the super trend and you get a correction. And generally the correction is sort of typically about, I like to think, the distance from the line to the bottom here. So we do have that scenario now, and the question is, does it motor up from here? I'm telling you, I still think we've got further to go, but we are effectively potentially doing that complacency shoulder now, which might lead us to a little bit lower, maybe something like 90k. We do have sniper levels around 88k as well, which I think should be considered as a potential low. I will tell you that I am bidding in this region at the minute. That's my preferred entry point. But let's actually just quickly go and have a look at the order book, because that's important. So while the setup looks exactly the same and all the indicators are suggesting that we're in a similar situation and we need to pay attention because we might get a breakout to the upside, the one thing that has changed is that, unlike the previous example which I showed us, which was somewhere back here, yeah, so we were previously just looking at, I'm getting lost here. What day is that? 12th of November. Yeah. So we were looking at this before, weren't we? We were looking at that. When we came and did this last time, this here, by the way, is like showing the net, whether or not the order book has got more bids or asks. So when it's red, it's more asks. When it's green, it's more bid. And you can see that there's always going to be at the top probably more asks than bid. Whereas but there wasn't too much here, and you could see as time went on, it was sort of depleted a bit as you eat into the asks, and then once those asks were kind of diminished, you eventually just burst through. And you can see that as we kept going, the ask side of the order book, which is the sell side, started to build back up again. Now, of course, we've got our friend Mr. Saylor, who likes to spend billions on Bitcoin, or of other people's money, of debt rather, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And he's stacked up, since then we've stacked up these big asks again, which is great for Saylor because, he needs to buy Bitcoin and some people are willing to sell at these prices. And you can see at the minute there's about 1.16 billion Bitcoin on the book, which is about 12,000 Bitcoins. And that's like chump change really for Saylor. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that. You'll have people who are selling via bots, people who just turn up and sell, people who decide they want to sell a little bit here and there. And so it's not representative of that's it. There's only 12,000. But it is telling us that there is quite a bit to work through before potentially going higher. By the way, I'm looking at within 10% of price. I do also like to look at 25%, and this is just the spot bid, by the way. Now you can see within 25% how it's changed to being green through all of this. Yes, okay, within 10% of price, there was a lot of asks on the book, and it was more sellers. Within a bigger, more important range, actually, there was much bigger bid. So it is good to look at both. But even within that 25% range, it's still bear heavy. But actually, if you look at that, we've just widened the range by 15%, and we've not really increased the amount of asks there. It's only gone to 1.4 billion. So that's kind of telling us the big chunk of change of sellers is between sort of 90 and just tipping north of 100. So probably around 196 or something like that. So yes, the difference is, so it's important to look at TradingView and come up with things, but remember in TradingView, most of the time, most indicators are based upon three different things, which is price, time, and volume. So you can't get things such as order book and order flow in here, and market positioning either. So you kind of do need to look at these other sites, including like ours, which has got some of this data as well. So other things at the moment with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, this is the liquidity chart for Bitcoin. And what I like to look at, come back to that in a second. What I like to look at is how liquid have we got? How many sellers are there above? So we do have liquidity between over 100K, and it only goes up to about 109 as well, actually. So there are definitely liquidations which could help us get there, but we know the spot market is pretty heavy. Despite that, we've got Mr. Saylor who wants to buy, his 200 grams of the Bitcoin. So it's much easier if you've got people who are going to get liquidated as well in the derivatives market and help price go higher. This is the hourly weighted average funding rate. And you can see that generally it's on the trend down. So of course, the way that funding works is that when funding's based on derivatives markets, and the intention of the funding price or the funding rate rather, is to make sure that people are effectively penalized if they are continuously hitting the buy button and sending the derivatives market away from the spot price. So the funding rate is a mechanism that punishes people who are in that long or whatever for being long by giving them a rate of interest every 8 hours. And if that rate of interest continues up higher, it becomes uneconomical to be in the position, particularly the higher the leverage you are. So at the minute, it is coming down, which is pretty good to see. So people are a little bit bearish and, generally more interested in selling as we got to the highs. So that is okay. And generally speaking, it is actually quite low overall as well, which isn't too bad. One thing that I'm a little bit concerned about in the short term is open interest. Open interest, it is obviously up loads, which is great. You want open interest to be going up with price because you want traders to be entering the market and continuously pushing it up. At the same time, you want people to be going short so that they add fuel when the price continues going up and Sailor keeps buying the spot market, and they're forced into becoming buyers as well to send it in even further. But what you don't really like to see is open interest effectively going sideways as prices going up. That can be a little bit of a concern. It depends on the scenario. I'd prefer to see it going up with price. It's not a disaster, but it's just not the optimal kind of thing to see. And then we do have the long short ratio. So this is the number, or the ratio of accounts who are long versus those who are short in the market. And that is telling us, and of course, it can be done on derivatives markets as well, which are always 1-to-1, but leverage spot markets, that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't all net off to zero because there's another person on the other side of the trade. That's done via loaning debt instead. So what we can see with that is it is obviously only one, which is great. So when things get overheated, price and people start hammering into the market, 1.3 is actually not too bad. Over 2 is pretty rough. 2.3 in this cycle. So if there's more than 2 people long for everyone short, that can be pretty bad. But at the minute, we're pretty much flat, around 96k. So people are pretty apathetic overall with price. But what we can see is as price is stagnating, we've sort of, relatively speaking, rocketed up here in the short term with the long short ratio, which isn't ideal. What you really want to see is you want to see price coming down and the long short ratio. Sorry, when we're in a downtrend, what you want to look for is where it's concerning is here. So you can see that the purple line here is the ratio dramatically increasing and the price also coming down. That means that people are desperately trying to get long into the market, but the price is going the other direction. And generally that continues until it reverses. So you can see eventually we hit a bottom, the ratio is at the highest point, and then it started reversing. And that's a great entry signal. I often look for that, and then you can combine that with things like Predator or just trend analysis or whatever. And when you get that, it gives you a much more powerful position you can be in. By the way, we do have a free part of the website for foils. We do all of the hard work for you. So this works with open interest, funding rate, and long short ratio. You can easily just come along and say, okay, I want to know when everything's bullish. What coins are bullish on all of these things? And I'm going to go and look at those on the charts. So if you need to have a bit of a cheat sheet, there's hundreds of coins in the market. Why don't you just go and do that and then start your day looking at those? Because that's where the shorter term you might have your best chance of finding something which is opportunity in the market. So you can just go and check that out on the site if you so wish. So overall, at the moment, what we'd say then is this a complacency shoulder? I don't think it's going to be a disaster, because overall we've got that demand. We have got some lows here, which could they get challenged? Yeah, I mean, this trend is broken down. So we kind of actually have a bit of a complacency style inception thing going on. So if I was being consistent, I'd say maybe we come back and retest something in here. short term. So around about 95, 600, 95, 900. And then, you know, from there, if that were to worsen, potentially, you know, we'll potentially see that lower target, which actually interestingly is taking us down to the sniper level of around 88. 88's a great number as well. People love 8. So people will probably bid at 88k, 88888. Everyone will be there. So yes, I am bullish, very much so. There's so much going on with MicroStrategy continuously raising debt, buying in, offering. The great thing about MicroStrategy is that it offers an entry vehicle for people who struggle to gain access to crypto. So a great example is people in the UK and the pensions are not able to buy into the ETFs, but what they can do is they can buy equities. So they're able to go and buy MicroStrategy and have it in their pension and not be subjected to tax when they buy and sell it. And also for a lot of people, that's where the most amount of the capital actually resides. And also people have a long-term view on Bitcoin. So of course they may want to go and dip into that. And of course there's equity funds who will be able to potentially not go and buy Bitcoin directly because of their covenants of the fund, but they can get exposure to MicroStrategy. So there's that. Then you've got the fact that they are raising debt on the bond market. You can actually check out the MicroStrategy debt. Here's all of the debt tickers. And you can see the most volatile one at the minute, I think, is this one. And you can see how the value of the debt is changing over time. Now, the value of the debt's important because there's a convertibility of the debt into equity in the future. So there's a future expectation attached to the debt note itself. And that means, and actually, I think that the gains on the debt has actually been greater than the gains on MSTR, strangely. But that allows people who are only able to invest in fixed income funds, pensions, stuff like that. Those guys are also able to get exposure to crypto. So there's just tons more ability to get involved in the market now. So that is fantastic. There's also the options market. I did do a tweet about the options market for gold after gold was the gold ETFs were launched in the 2000s. Gold went off on one after the options market was launched. Of course, 2008 came and kind of spoilt the party in the interim, but it did end up going up quite a lot after the options. People are calling for the top on that. I say those people didn't do their research. But anyway, before I look at MicroStrategy, what we're going to do is have... is my computer crashing? Someone wants me to subtitle it. I think you can just turn on subtitles. Maybe that'll work for you. Yes, the last thing I wanted to mention on Bitcoin short term is... just a minute. Actually, I don't know why I did that. There. I'll stay as Decent Trader for now. Is the Sander rally with a lovely picture there created by ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT, tell me, ChatGPT, about the time. Well, it did a full analysis for me of when Bitcoin breaks its all-time high during the same year as the Santa Claus rally, what happens? But to finesse that, I really wanted to look at the scenario we're in, where it's broken its all-time high that year, and there's a Santa Claus rally. So in almost all of the examples where it broke its all-time high, it goes up anyway. I think there was one where it didn't. But the times where it specifically broke the all-time high earlier that year, these are the returns that you get. So there's a return average of 22%. So the question is, how happy is this Christmas going to be this year? And can that 22%, where have we gone? I've closed my chart. The chart I was showing you earlier on with my model with prices was saying effectively the 120 odd would be the place. Can we get to that earlier band of resistance on my model in December, in the last week of December up until the 2nd of January, which is the time that the so-called Santa rally occurs? That's where we would get to. So can we get there? There's 12,000 Bitcoins, plus obviously the ones we don't know about in between, and Saylor's there with 200Ks with the Bitcoins. And of course, there's the Trump and all the other guys with their strategic reserves that they're now coming out saying they're wanting for for their governments to invest in Bitcoin. So Saylor's kind of up against it. I forgot to even mention that before, but Saylor's up against it because he's got all of these other people who are trying to get in there, and Saylor's like pure FOMO on Bitcoin. So if Trump wants to get $1 million Bitcoins into the USA strategic reserve, Saylor needs to get in as quick as he can. So he's managed to raise that 21 billion like pretty damn quick. So if he can get the next 21 billion, I'd say if we could, like 210,000 Bitcoin, 12,000 Bitcoin in the way, 5,000, his last 5 billion didn't do too much, but eventually it's going to get through. And if that's the case, onward we go. So I tend to think that that's going to be the defining factor short term. And let's say on average it does that 22% rally. Well, if we're around where we are now, it's obviously going to take us north of 100. But of course, there is a chance that we end up coming down lower into the sort of 88K. So, it doesn't really matter to me too much who's just trading it at the minute. I don't really care short term what's going to happen. But that 88K level, if we're there and it's like the 3rd week of December, and we're hitting the sniper level and stuff, then you can put your average, your 20% to the upside or more. Could be less, of course. Where does that get us to? Just north of 100. So it depends where you think we're going to be. But as I say, history kind of dictates that we should be bullish going into this year. What I'd love to see actually is for this to happen. Then you'll get people who don't know how to do head and shoulders saying, actually, guys, we're going to go here. And at the same time, Saylor FOMO's in, the target's 77K for those guys, but actually we end up ripping through it. So I would say actually that the other bearish scenario is that we come and retest this breakout here, which is also incidentally where we find another sniper level. So I don't think that's going to happen, personally. As I say, this is subject to change. Something could happen next week where I change my mind. I'm not married to these ideas. You're getting my idea as it currently stands. Not, don't come back in 3 months, tell me that I'm wrong when I change my mind sort of 2 weeks later. And you do need to bear that in mind when you go dunking on people on Twitter. If they're actually a trader, they can have an opinion, and that opinion is based on things which are subject to change. So let's shift on to MicroStrategy. So MicroStrategy has been one of the other things I've been talking about on Twitter mostly. Now, I wasn't really paying too much attention, I have to confess, until we got up to about $180, which is when I entered. I entered in on this candle here, this day. What was it, the 4th of October? And I did it in my pension. Why? Because when I put money in my pension, I don't have to pay. I get all of the higher rate tax back, which is great. You get nearly 50% of your money back that you would otherwise have got taxed on. So fantastic. So I bought in there. I actually bought in another tranche or whatever the word is, around about the 9th as well. And then, don't forget, of course, this is actually what that looks like. Yeah. So since then, we've done nearly a 200 and odd % gain. So there is a really useful site out there called, where is it? MicroStrategy Tracker. Now, MicroStrategy, obviously, what their model is, they go away to the bond market and they say, look, guys, I need to raise some money. If I give you some money, what's going to happen is you're either going to get an interest rate or not, as it is now. Normally, you give someone interest if they're going to lend you your money. MicroStrategy don't need to at the minute because there's a convertibility rate which means that they'll be able to change it for equity in the future, which then means it has this other value attached to it. And as a result, because of that speculation and that extra demand, we'll have this net asset value premium, which is effectively the value over and above which the stock is trading versus the actual Bitcoins held on the balance sheet itself. These green dots, what we'll have at the side here is the net asset value premium. So that is the how many times, so 2 times greater, 4 times over. And then on the side, we've got, previous prices that we've been at when we've known that. And if you use that, you can derive these potential lines or curves to predict where we might be given the NAV. So I've got my own model, but you can see that when we effectively went above the premium, that's what I wanted to do. When we got above the premium here on the 20th of November, that was effectively the top for MSTR. So you don't really want to deviate too far away from the trend. We've got a logarithmic one, which is the orange trend here. And at the minute, we're actually back below the trend, but kind of at a place where it was still sort of overvalued. I think that's about fair value at the minute for MicroStrategy. Any lower is probably, well, again, not advice, but could be an interesting place to be. So we're kind of fair enough valued at the minute, I think, for MicroStrategy for where we are in the cycle. But what I did was I created my own little forecast. So I sold at $500 or just before, it was like $4.95 or something. I sold half of my position and reinvested it into someone else. I doubled, what did I put in that? Just 180. I was up at 500. I was more than 100% up, which is great. And don't forget, I'm actually doing it in my pension. So I don't really want to be totally exposed to MicroStrategy. But I tell you what, I made better returns on my pension in 7 weeks than the guy managing my that part of my pension fund had managed, I think, in the last 10 years or something. So I don't know what that tells you, whether they're good or whether I'm good or they're bad or something in between. But anyway, so what we'll have here for these different lines model out like for each different price where the NAV might be based off that linear stuff we're looking at, which I can then use to derive what I think the share price is going to be. I don't know why they don't have this on the site, but they probably had it at some point. So why did I sell when we were at 95? The premium, was above that line that I was showing, 304, and I'd modeled would be somewhere between 400 and 540. 500 seems like a good place to sell, to be honest. So that's why I sold there. So if I'm saying that we're going to go between 120 and 180, well, we might go to 120, 180. That's telling us that, and the model price that they've got is that the NAV will continue to go higher. I think that that's a lot. The NAV thing's much more understood now than it was previously. And I think a lot of people are just piling in. Depends how crazy the cycle goes. If there's like Trump turns up on the 1st of January to buy 1 million Bitcoins, all of this shit goes out the window. Nothing will work. Bitcoin will just go up like crazy. And that's the sort of the end story. But let's assume it's just like steady rate, somewhere between 120, 180. Let's say the premium last time, the top was between 3 and 4. It's going to be somewhere in this range, right? So the lower end would be 500 for 120, which would kind of, I think we probably would go there if we went north again. The premium would be a little bit lower. So 500 would probably be where we'd get to. Probably going to be a bit higher than that. And maybe it's 550. But if we get to 180, it is saying, we could, assuming we just stay on the line, so we stay at the premium that we've seen previously, 768, $1,000, up to 1,200. So it's definitely got room to go for MicroStrategy. Personally, I think 750 for me is where I'll start to be, seriously considering coming out. Short term though, because I do want to hold quite a big stack of MSTR shares in my portfolio. let's have a good look what people are saying just briefly. Hopefully you've recorded. Yeah, YouTube it always records. You have to go to the YouTube channel and press on live. I know that this is probably going to be quite a long one. That's what she said. But you know, you can go and dip back into it if you want later on. So yes, I do think it's going to go higher, and that premium will be sort of roughly giving us an idea of where we're going to be. So the thing is, I do think the best part of the move was here to here, wasn't it, this cycle? I don't think we're going to get the same kind of crazy again. So it's going to just probably put in a big bearish divergence, in my opinion, eventually. So that's my strategy with MicroStrategy. It is my MicroStrategy of MicroStrategy. So yeah, let's talk about what I think in terms of what I'm looking for the cycle top then for Bitcoin. I better get rid of that off the chart just in case people think I was thinking that was what was going to happen. And I have a list here of things, all of them other than the first one we've talked about. And these are so normally what I look at, right? So all of the short-term stuff will be in play anyway, if we're topping out. Now, that's going to look something like the Predator on the 3-day is at red. Now, why is that? Why am I bothered about that? Because it pretty much always gets it right. Yeah. If you're long and this thing's, if you're long and it's red, fair enough, you know, but you're probably wrong. So that's really important. Of course, I've been talking about the 50-day moving average. That is also really important. So this thing can go red, as we saw in the previous cycle, but we weren't actually breaking the 50 at that point. We were getting close to it. But eventually we did turn red below the 50-day moving average. So that's another really important, like, oh dear, sort of situation. What's it look like? What else have I talked about? How's the super trend on the settings I like to use broken? Yes. Yes. Bear. Yeah. And what happened here? Look, we broke above green. Above 50. Yes. Go. Yeah. Here we did break down below the 50. We did break the super trend, but we weren't red. Continuation. Okay. So not all of the things were there to get you out. Here, okay, green went red, broke the super trend below the 50. That was game over for pretty much the whole time. And then what happened? We did not break the super trend. Every other green time above the 50, yeah, that's great. It's a strong bullish rally in a bearish trend. Yeah. Eventually, the bottom. Yeah. Where did I say we were going to go to 180K? The top of the initial rally, of course. That probably helped people short the market, to be fair. So whenever I say something like that, it inevitably always dumps afterwards. But, you know, otherwise, that's kind of like where I like to be. So short term, if I see that, I'm starting to think, well, this could be it, guys. Yeah, particularly if we're below the 50. I don't like being below the 50. Now, we talked about market positioning. If we start coming down, now, again, I went on Benjamin Cohen's show back in, well, December of 2021, and I was saying, we're going to go low. Actually, no, it was somewhere around here. It was earlier. I can't remember. I don't give myself enough credit, to be honest. But if I can see that there's a ton of liquidity below us, like loads of liquidity on the charts. Let's go and look at, yeah, Bitcoins. If we've got a ton of liquidity below us, such as this, and we're like creeping around sort of 58K, if I can see that, and this is what I was saying in that live stream, go and watch it, right? If I can see that, and people are long on it, and price is coming down, and open interest is decreasing, and actually its worst case scenario is when price is coming down and open interest is increasing, which I think is what actually happened in that scenario, and funding rate is going up, which is all summarized here, by the way. So if they're lazy, you can just get it from this this table. But if you do see that, it'll just cut all of these different things. Again, big problem if that is happening. And you can do it from the lower timeframes, you know, as they start getting bearish across all the timeframes, then you know you're in trouble. Yeah. So if that happens, that's another situation where I will be seriously concerned. So they're the sort of short-term things that I'm worried about. But then there's the fundamentals as well. So the first one, which is something we haven't talked about, is Coinbase number one on the Apple Store? You know, not Coinbase Finance, Coinbase, the app itself. Sorry, out of all of the apps. I mean, that's crazy if you think about it. But if that happens, it's always been the top. What else? I didn't talk about the weekly settings for Predator and Iron Man. Again, these are even worse when it goes wrong for Bitcoin. So here you can see it did go red and we're below the 50. We stayed red, but we never closed below the weekly super trend. Green, fine. Above the 50, great. Perfect. Imagine that. This situation here, there were people who were bearish when everything was bullish. Anyway, here, red one. Again, the 3-day went red, not only the 3-day, the weekly was red. We broke the 50 off, obviously, on both. And then eventually the super trend went. So, you know, you could have been forgiven there for thinking, okay, it's going to get even worse. But I would just say that you were being a bit slow and you weren't paying enough attention, really. Here, eventually, we did break above and it was green again. Here, Confluence, I mean, that's the killer blow. That's how you sell it. I actually sold at 58K in the previous cycle, and that is this candle here is why. I did get back in a little bit here, and then I probably fumbled a little bit, to be honest. Got back out, but as you know, what happened here? Green above the 50, broke the super trend. It's like when that kind of stuff, all the stars are aligning. You know, if you can't put it together at that point because you're listening to Capo who thinks it's going to go to 12, well, you fucked, aren't you? Anyway. So that's the higher time frame view that I wanted to look at. Of course, we looked at Phil's pi cycle. If that's crossed, probably need to be paying attention. Again, my model, are we above the geometric mean in the top band or not? And also MicroStrategy, actually. If MicroStrategy is at a premium of 5.6, that is also bad. Sorry, no, I'm looking at my MVRV there. If MVRV is 5.6, that's the one where you're above the realized cap. If that gets up here, probably going to be a lower high. That's another reason. And then is MicroStrategy just doing like ridiculous stuff on the premium, which just makes no sense. Yeah. And if all of those are red and you're still long, you're doing it wrong. It's as simple as that. Yeah. You're not applying risk management in any way. I'm not saying it has to be that basket of things, but you need to have a list of reasons to get out. Yeah. There's a reason why you enter the trade, and you can keep that list as well. And you can cross those off if they're no longer true. But of course, some of those things I'm talking about here are those things. So the reasons for me entering, if they're not true anymore, they're the reasons for me getting out. And that's the way it's going to be. So we have actually done an hour so far. Right. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Should I stop here and just answer some questions and come back tomorrow and do ETH and Sol, or should I continue? Somebody in the chat. I don't even know if there's anyone there. I don't know how to check, but I can get the comments up on StreamYard. So, what are people saying? Oh shit! Loads of people. I've missed loads of comments here. Go. Come on, someone else. Keep going, mate. Oh, I'm getting tired, you know. You've got to go. Keep going. Double top on ETH. Double drop ETH. Right. Let's just do ETH then. Actually, let's just blast through it. Why not? You can come back if you're bored. So, Ethereum. So, I have been on Twitter slaughtering Ethereum for some time now. Let's have a look at the weekly. So there have been a couple of times where it's nearly been a goer on ETH. It's really sort of dragged people in, hasn't it? And what would I say about this? So we're looking at ETH Bitcoin here, and we're still not out of the trend of the downside, to be brutally honest. I don't like using Predator on this pair, but here, what did we have? Inverted head and shoulders, upside, yeah. Here, rounding top, trend at the downside, which has kind of ended up with some acceleration. It's also come back to and actually just broken down even below this important level, which is where we saw the breakout of the inverse head and shoulders in the last bull market. Now, I think some of the reason why we broke out is because Suzu and co were absolutely pumping in. And then that's kind of unwound, obviously, over time. And other people, as time's gone on, have just sort of capitulated. It's like a slow capitulation that's happened here. Like the earlier you capitulate, the better, randomly enough. But yeah, look at this horrible M top on ETH. What was the target of that? Again, these don't work quite well. So the 1.618 has been hit. I don't think it's going to come back. I did say originally I thought it might come a bit lower, like probably in here, actually. So around about 2.026 or 0.025, something in here would have been my preferred place. To be clear, I'm not long ETH BTC at all. I am currently long ETH USD, using Bitcoin as my collateral. Now, why was that the case? Oh, can you see why? Is there any hints? Do you know what I'm doing yet? You know, so not great on the weekly, still not quite there on the weekly, but of course the daily, it's a beast. Broke out of the super trend, green. On the 3-day, holy shit. First one in ages, all things green, all indicators green, above the 50 and a break through the super trend all at once. The perfect entry. Yeah. Then everything got started turning on even more. So, you know, I'm still going to trade ETH. Even I don't have to sell my Bitcoin. I can use it, leverage it up, and buy ETH with it, and still be long Bitcoin and get paid in Bitcoin if I make money. The perfect crime. So ETH also, if we zoom out, looks absolutely great on the higher time frame. So as I posted on Twitter, actually, you know, when you see this, and I think is he called Brian Beamish? Yeah, good guy to follow. I think it was him who I first saw when the market's smiling at you, you know, it's telling you something. So it's kind of like an inverse head and shoulders. I don't know about the targets for ETH. I did think originally 8 to 10K this cycle would kind of make sense. I think the problem with Ethereum is that, well, I sold it all actually. The point at which I sold all of my ETH, I did not get my strategy 100% right on ETH. I sold all of my ETH that I've held since 20. When did I get back in? I got back in around $100 in 2016. No, not 2016. I got in at $8 in 2016. But I got back in to Ethereum at about $110 in 2018 or so, I don't want to say. I sold the lot. And the reason I sold it, I'm not joking, is whenever that Vitalik started acting the fool, let's call it, on Twitter, like coming out with, you know, wearing masks when he's on airplanes and just doing these ridiculous dances on the stage, I just thought, what am I doing investing in this guy? He's an absolute fool. Yeah, I want to invest in Satoshi, who's just quietly moved on, you know. And that was like my saving grace. And I think it dumped like nearly 50% or whatever it is since then. So I haven't bought it back. And do you know what? I'm not going to buy it back. I'm so disillusioned with the guy at the top that unless something changes there, like God knows where it's going to be going, you know. But for the purpose of this, that kind of doesn't really matter, to be honest. I much prefer being in with Sailor and gang than Vitalik and co. So with that little story out of the way, you know, where might this go? If you look at this on a just a very basic, assuming that this thing gets up here, it's a little bit messy because let's use the weekly actually. Still, it's kind of a bit of a mess, but let's assume that's what we're looking at as the highs, as the neckline. It's saying about 7K. So it's, you know, if you did a measured target, I don't think it's going to go too much more than that, in my personal opinion, for partly for the same reasons I just said. These guys who've got loads of money in institutions, if they find out Vitalik's at the top, they will be thinking, I'm not joking, along the lines of the way that I was like, what are we doing here investing in this guy? But short term, that doesn't mean we can't go higher. Don't forget, Ethereum has huge transactional volume going through it due to the amount of money that's being sent around in USDC, USDT, and all of the other tokens, most of which is rubbish. And sell 6K and be happy. I think that's great. A good thought process. 1.618, that's normally where you want to be starting to get out because you don't always hit the measured target, you know. So somewhere in there. 6K, 7K, and if it gets to 8, fair enough. You know, I really do hope Ethereum does sort of get its act together and the guys that stop selling their own coins. It's never a good sign when they're selling their own coins, is it? If MicroStrategy were buying all these Bitcoins and Sailor was like aggressively selling MicroStrategy, you'd be somewhat concerned about that. I do understand he has done a little bit of that earlier in the year, probably to have his own self-custody. But if he was absolutely dumping MicroStrategy on the market in the way that the ETH devs are, then, you know, you want to pay attention to that. And a lot of people do the same with things like, you know, Amazon shares with Bezos and Elon with Tesla as well. So yeah, maybe ETH's going to get up there. But the important reason why I was super bullish on ETH was which I posted before it really started taking off the other day. Get one of these, by the way, if you're a crazy person like me. ETH's got all of this liquidity here. It's loads of liquidity. Now, remember, Bitcoin's struggling. It's kind of what you want to do is go sideways for a bit and consolidate, which might be what happens with Bitcoin. Why? Because people start shorting the market, creating the ability for them to become forced sellers when they're all short, all trapped in their short positions. Michael Saylor turns up with a 20 bill. What's going to happen? There's no shorters left. Saylor sends it higher. Those guys are forced into being buyers and they send it higher. That's what it represents in simple terms. And what we have here is ETH. Look at ETH by comparison. Now, that's representing the fact that effectively all of the people who were short here have not been taken out yet. And as such, you know, where's the box? Where should this box be? I do actually have a liquidity tool. This comes with the Predator and all the other stuff. So what I like to really pay attention to is the 3x liquidations. And you can see that that's where the majority of it is, effectively up to 5K. Let's just have a look on the chart. Here, 4.48. So this is a bit more accurate than the thing in TradingView because you can stack on top of each other for different liquidation levels. But yeah, 4.5K looks like it's going to be tricky to get above short term. Of course, some of the people who are short on the way up as well are included in that. So it's all the guys who are short from previously, plus people who were shorting like 3x and stuff who haven't been liquidated yet. So, so it's got a much more interesting profile than Bitcoin from a liquidity point of view, which I think you just have to pay attention to, particularly if Bitcoin's going to take a breather for a month or 3 weeks rather, that will mean that people are going to get a little bit bored of hanging around doing nothing, and they'll start betting on ETH, particularly if it's getting inflows which are greater than Bitcoin. So Ethereum's Bitcoin inflows on Friday, 332 million, which is greater than Bitcoin's for the first ever time since both of them were running at the same time. And I just think you have to pay attention to that. You know, we know that it's got this extra liquidity. Can it just come and tap the previous all-time high? Against 4,500, I was saying it runs out, wasn't it? So previous all-time high. That's the target short term for me. I think if we zoom in a little bit, we do have a target here as well, which we can work off pretty much. Yeah, which takes us in the same zone. So for me, that's where we're looking at. I mean, it's a bit overextended at the minute. Yeah, so could come back. I mean, if this trend line breaks out, you really need to pay attention because it'll probably just go straight up and then maybe come back and retest the line a little bit later on. But for now, it looks pretty good. So Ethereum, as I say, sorry for ranting about it. Vitalik's a bitch, and that's why I'm not holding ETH for anything other than holding stable coins or other shit coins, really, to be honest. I'd said I sold it all. I've obviously got a little bit. And then Sol. So I'm gonna have to blast through this one because I am getting tired. I'm getting old, you know. I was young when I joined this. I was 8 years or 9 years ago, or whatever it is, when I joined crypto. You want to see the state of us now? I've aged about 25 years. So it doesn't look that much different. Like Sol obviously had the most horrendous drawdown due to Sam and Co, who were big proponents of Sol. I must laugh at Sam, by the way. Imagine being stuck in jail for the rest of your life after dropping the bag when you were literally the kingpin of the industry and all you had to do was not fuck it up. And he completely messed it up. Poor lad. Not. He's still got some of my money. Fortunately, I barely had any much money on there, but I'll be pleased to get it back. It'll pay for a holiday or something. Where are we? What am I looking for? See, I'm getting tired. Have I dropped Predator off? No. Have I hidden it? Yes. Right. So 3-day. Oh my God! What do we see? Break above the. It failed here. Actually, it doesn't always work. That's you know, you can't always guarantee that this thing's going to always work, but pretty much always works. So at least for a bit. So here we are. Green super trend. Go. Every indicator bullish. Off we go to the races. 164. We're now at 240. And of course, I do recommend you do this as well, by the way, putting it back on linear, because you can completely lose sight of actually of where you are, and how much it's actually appreciated. So Sol, the problem with Sol at the minute is we've got Sol ETH as well. I prefer to use Predator on USD pairs, but Sol ETH had been, you know, absolutely flying. So broke out. That's a good example, by the way, of what I just said with ETH, where it breaks out, probably accelerates, potentially comes back and tests the trend. The problem with ETH is that Sol rather is that pump.fun site got shut down, didn't it? And I do think it was getting a little bit out of hand overall, with the crazy meme market and the meme cycle. I'm not a meme trader. I've got a few memes, like whatever that actually really means. I don't even know what that really means when I say it, to be honest, if I was to try and explain what it is. But I do have some memes, like Bonk, for example. But that was like just I don't know, just a meme in itself, I suppose. which is probably what I'd explain that it was. But anyway, like, I'm not seriously into this. I've got too much other stuff going on. I want to focus on the main events. But anyway, I think it has sort of, we've certainly come to a point where it's been saturated a little bit, and the big money's really looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin, well, just Bitcoin really, and coming back to the Ether, I guess. But anyway, point here is Sol has been outperforming ETH a lot, but it is looking a little bit worrying here that if this trend line breaks, there could be a switch back to Ethereum. And because Sol at the moment, there is ETFs put in for Sol, but there's no ability for that capital to be attracted there yet. I do think that, you know, perhaps if everyone jumps on the Ethereum train, maybe, you know, ETH gets its little run. So that's the kind of watch out with Sol. But the other thing is that's great about Sol, and I use this as intended, it's only $224. Everyone can buy a Sol. Well, not everyone, but most people can buy a Sol. So why wouldn't you? And that is very important. Unit bias is important. I didn't actually mention that for Bitcoin, unit bias has changed because of things like IBIT. You can go and buy an IBIT ticker, and it's like, I don't know what it was, but it was about $35 before we went on this run. And that's cheap, 35. That means you can have 5 shares for 35. That's great. You know, 140 quid, and that's 4, isn't it? But then you're laughing. Also, the people buying those bonds to give money to Sailor doesn't care. So no unit bias there. Buying MicroStrategy. Well, I could buy a lot of shares at 200, so why wouldn't I just buy them at 200? So the idea for Bitcoin that there was always the problem of, I can't buy a whole Bitcoin, you know, I haven't got 100K. Well, you can buy 5 shares though of MicroStrategy, and you know that's going to cost you, I don't know, just over $1,000. Look at the upside on that. You know, it's much easier for people to digest. But Sol, of course, has the benefit over Ethereum of it being cheap, and when newbies come into the market, they'll love it. So a very similar kind of chart to Ether, kind of has that messy inverted, well, would you call that a shoulder? Not really, but it was kind of smiling at us a little bit again. But, you know, for me, I think Sol is probably the bellwether in this cycle, because it had the biggest run, and I think it'll probably be the one that tells us the top's in, because there won't be that, well, there may or may not be that like institution sort of wanting to get out on a slower basis. I think the top this cycle for Bitcoin, unless like something stupid happens, is more likely to be like a rounding top or something, or a double top, similar to last time, or maybe something a bit like gold, which I haven't talked about here today. It could end up being similar to gold in its previous super cycle, which we are closely following. That is, of course, when I posted another chart last time, the one before the one we just looked at, I said Bitcoin and gold. I personally think short term may be lower, but the purpose here is to consider the outcome of the new asset following the path of another, where all the participants are the same people. And what happened? It did it, didn't it? So what does my very simple mind think? It thinks, okay, well, it's not there, but let's go back to the time that gold did the same thing as what we're doing now. Gold weekly, and this is what the top look like. Lower high. Yeah, so of course it's institutions, so of course it makes you think there's going to be a descending triangle, which then doesn't break down and breaks out. Yeah, but you can see did break the 50, broke it here. It's a little bit different timeframes and stuff. You kind of need to adjust a little bit on legacy markets, but descending triangle breakout, double top. What was it, even a double top? Just lower high, wasn't it? So and then just a bear market, which actually doesn't look hugely dissimilar to what the kind of thing Bitcoin likes to do. I mean, sometimes I wonder how people really mess these things up. It's the reason that people really mess up normally is due to their own sort of bias, really. That was their reaccumulation at all-time highs and breakout. And all of the charts look a bit like this. And, you know, if anything, Bitcoin's doing this at the minute. Little bit of sideways. Let's wait for the 50 to catch up. Where is it? What did I just say? Go sideways for 3 weeks, let the 50 catch up. And then in an ideal world, we're going to get this to 120. And then I'm going to take profit, or 125 or 130. Then I'm going to take profit for the first time. And I'll take out some of my third that I'm never coming back with. And I'm going to go and, I don't know, have a nice time in real life. And that's going to be it, really. But Sol, where's it gone? So again, it does look extremely similar to that gold chart, doesn't it? A little bit of consolidation, on we go. So the first target we're going to be looking at, well, Sol does it gravitates towards these round numbers, and then it sort of chokes for a bit. Like, look at that, went north of 100, choked, needed the 50 to catch up. Similar sort of thing around $50. Here, struggling around 200. Where do you think it might get a little bit of a problem next? It's going to be around 300 and then 400, which are just around targets of where we're the next two targets basically are that, aren't they? So you've got the measured target from this consolidation of 2 is the same as the 1.618 of the whole of this cup here. So $400, it's not a bad place to start thinking about taking a bit of profit. 300, maybe short term, somewhere around there. We do tend to tip north of the big round numbers eventually and then come back. So we went much above 200, didn't we? 205, something like that, a little bit. But we'll come back to nearly 100. I would just apply that method the whole way. If you've got, you know, no tools or no strategy or nothing in particular that you want to work off, of course, I will be working off my tools, or not my tools, the Decent Trader tools, and it'll be that simple. And using Sniper for support and sniping the levels as well. Just look at the Sniper levels, by the way. Put in the Sniper level, and it never went below it. It was the entry point every time, sniping away. Similar kind of thing on Bitcoin as well. So I haven't talked about that very much at the moment. What I would say, I will leave on this point actually. You need to be adaptive and understand where you are in this market. Yeah, are we trending like this, or are we consolidating? And if we're consolidating, we want to go down to range trading or using, you know, other methods which are support and resistance, like, you know, which is what we've got with Sniper. Look at it, sniping the tops, getting the lows. Yeah. Are we doing something like that and consolidating, or are we breaking out? So what I'm doing is, if I'm like out of my trade because we've lost the 3-day, if I'm out of my spot position or whatever, and we're consolidating, then I just simply switch on to support and resistance until we get the breakout and my perfect entry process. I can't believe I haven't actually looked at any of the other indicators which I use, but they're kind of not that required at the minute because we're trending. Obviously, you can see we're losing momentum. Yeah, so PMO here, which is Predator Momentum Oscillator, where it's green, you've got confluence between Predator Momentum Oscillator and Terminator. Terminator being the volume-based momentum. So we've got price and volume-based, and when the green or purple, they're in confluence, and obviously you get your divergences as well. And at the minute, we do have a bit of a warning here. As long as we're above the 0 line, it's not all bad. So when you're kind of losing momentum, it's okay. You know, just as when it comes back, you get confluence between the two. it's go time. But if it's below 0, no good. Yeah, both are above 0, that's fine. But it's telling us, you can hear it's hitting the sniper levels and getting rejected. So a little bit caution. I do think that people have sold their soul to go to ETH, but I think after a little bit of sideways, that will probably return, particularly if we have that end of cycle retail stuff. So I don't think I need to wrap it up because I've kind of been summarizing it as we go. I will just say that I think that we're getting towards the part of the cycle where we probably will start to see old season when we get retail flowing in. However, I don't know if we'll ever see Bitcoin get to having as little market share as it has in the past. I think it's going to maintain what it's got in terms of market cap on dominance terms. So there you can see the top's probably in. I will gloat one last time. Actually, I did say back here. Look at this. Bitcoin dominance run. Look, it was the exact breakout of the bottom, guys, and that was the target, 60%. Ben Cohen, he copied me almost like 2 weeks after, and I knew that why he did that. The reason he did it, I think, is because the least risky thing to comment about if you're in the market was this at the bottom. Yeah. So you can see I knew at this point, okay, the bottom's probably in here. You can see the Bitcoin dominance is putting in a bottom. And off we went. And so I do think that this will come down. We'll probably lose this trend line. But I don't think we're ever going to go down here again. Like, this is where, you get crazy relative value, in inverted commas, versus Bitcoin at the top of the cycles. Yeah, every time. But actually, you can see since 2017, it did put in a slightly lower high, higher low rather than last time. So I think we're going to see a much higher low. 50. I don't know. Let me have a think about it. But initial guess, I don't see it going any lower than 50. I think it is a new paradigm shift overall in this market, but you never know what's going to happen in crypto. Someone else could come along, or something else could happen, or there'll be some other change. Got to be flexible in your thinking. If you think that, like I said back with Mr. Capo, if you're thinking it's going to go to 12K, he just couldn't get out of it, could he? The poor lad. And now he thinks the top is in for Bitcoin. Because why? Ooh, because the old whales are selling. I mean, how stupid do you have to be? I'm sorry to down to it. No, I'll take that back. How naive do you have to be to think that the whales are selling when there's 12,000 on the book, right? 12K on the book, Bitcoin for sale. And there's a guy that we know of who's trying to buy 210. Another guy who's trying to buy a million Bitcoin, So to me, it's all a little bit confusing. Why you would think the top's in now. There's no evidence of it. Based on all the metrics I've shown you, there's nothing to suggest the top's in. It's just looking at it and crying into your beer with a bit of a hunch, yeah, and it's a round number. Well, good luck to you if you think that's the case. Yeah, I'll keep to my strategies and you guys can keep to yours. If you are interested in decent trader, you can either, there is the chart. It doesn't say much for me not being able to find it. We do have a Black Friday sale with 55% off up to on the indicators. Or if you just like the cut of my jib and you want to listen to what I say a couple of times a week, join the Discord, which, by the way, is a very curated, excellent group. Shout outs to those guys. That's possible as well, but you also get access to all the other stuff on the site too, of course. So, if you're interested about the tools a little bit more, there's some videos and stuff like that. So I've done with myself all the business promotion. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you the next time.